Hello to all college football fans. Hope you're all having a good day and a good Monday, if that's even possible. If y'all aren't, I'm hoping to change that. As today, I'll be doing my conference predictions. So I brought it up in my last video that for this week, I'll be posting conference predictions for all the weekdays, Monday through Friday. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to do one Power 5 and one Group of 5 conference for all those days. So there's 10 of those total. I'm not counting the independent. There's 4 teams. And we all know Notre Dame's the best team in there anyways. There's no point talking about it. So I'll do that style. And I'm doing in alphabetical order. So today, we'll be looking at the Atlantic Coastal Conference and the American Athletic Conference. Starting with our first team in the ACC, we have Boston College. Last year, Boston College went 3-9. And this year, they do have a pretty easy schedule. Their non-conference schedule is really easy with Northern Illinois, Holy Cross, UConn, and Army. Those are 4 very winnable games. So with that and a relatively easy conference schedule with teams like Virginia Tech and Virginia, who were also really bad last year, that gives them 2 winnable games. So with that, I think Boston College could go 6-6 and maybe 7-5. They squeak in one more win. Their really only tough game is Florida State. So we'll see how it goes for them, but personally I think they can go 6-6 and can make a bowl game. Man, the ACC is pretty boring this year, but at least these next 3 teams will be fun to look at. As next up we got Clemson. Now, looking at them, the big thing for them is of course Florida State, Notre Dame, South Carolina. They lost to Notre Dame and South Carolina last year, and Florida State ranked ahead of them. Now, personally I think Florida State is better than them and will win that game. However, as of right now, I see Clemson beating South Carolina and Notre Dame. So for me, I think Clemson will go 11-1 with their 1 loss going to Florida State, because I think Florida State is a better team, and even though they'll be at home playing FSU, I think FSU will still win. Now, Duke was a surprising team, as last year they went 9-4 with a first-year head coach in Mike Elko. This year, with a lot of talent returning, they have a tougher schedule as they're playing Clemson week 1, and then after that they have Notre Dame, Florida State, and North Carolina. Now, I think they can beat North Carolina. I don't think they can beat the other 3 ranked teams. So, for me, I think at the best they can go 9-3. But I think realistically, even if they do beat North Carolina, they'll go 8-4, as they will probably not win all those unranked matchups. I imagine they'll probably slip up 1 game in there. So it's hard to imagine even if they do beat North Carolina, that they still won't finish 8-4. But it will still be a good season considering that Duke is not a great football school. Now, Florida State is the highest ranked team in the ACC this year, meaning that there are a lot of people's pick to win the conference and make the playoffs. We'll see how they do week 1 when they play LSU. Personally, I don't think they'll win that game, and that's probably the LSU fan in me speaking what I'm just saying. But after that, I think they can totally win out. In fact, I'm picking them to go 11-1 with that 1 loss being to LSU, and they will be the ACC regular season champion going to that championship game. Now with Georgia Tech, we see a team that probably has the hardest schedule in the conference this year, as they're playing Ole Miss, Clemson, North Carolina, and Georgia. That's not easy at all. They did have a turnaround mid-season, as with interim head coach Brent Key getting hired, they went from a 1-3 start to almost making a bowl game at 5-7. However, with the tough schedule they have this year, I don't imagine them getting to bowl eligibility this season. I think 5-7 is a good spot for them this year. Now, with Louisville finishing 6-2 last year, it would be safe to assume that they have a lot of momentum going into this year, and they could be a good team. However, with Malik Cunningham gone, it's hard to see a lot of momentum carrying over. With Jeff Brom coming over, that should be a hopeful coaching improvement, but for me, without that quarterback, it's hard to see that momentum coming through and maybe translating to maybe a 8-4, 9-3 season. So for me, I think 6-6 would be about good for them. Miami is one of those teams that also has one of the toughest schedules in the conference, as they're playing A&M out of schedule, and then in the ACC they're playing the 3 best teams as they're playing North Carolina, Florida State, and Clemson. Last year, Miami was really disappointing, as with Mario Cristobal, they started off ranked, but then they fell flat and missed a bowl game, with the low light of last season being that loss to Middle Tennessee. Now, I do think they can slightly improve and get back to a bowl game, so I do think 6-6 is a good spot for them. But I don't see them beating those 3 ranked teams. Maybe A&M, but I think they're out of luck when it comes to those ACC ranked teams. North Carolina was a team that had very, very slim playoff hopes after they were ranked 13th in the country, being 9-1. However, they fell apart and ended 9-5. The big reason they were successful last year was due to Drake May, who had an outstanding redshirt freshman season. Now, of course, with that, he's back, and with that, I mean, North Carolina is definitely still a great team with very slim ACC championship aspirations, as since ACC got rid of divisions, it's safe to assume that they can't get over Florida State and Clemson. But with looking at this season, they have some tough games like Clemson and South Carolina. And I think they're bound to get upsetted once. So for me, I think 9-3, just like last year, is a good spot for them. NC State last year was a team that disappointed a lot of people, as last year they were considered by some people a dark horse playoff team and conference contender. And they finished 8-5. It kind of looked rough for them when they almost lost to ECU week 1. And this year, with Devin Leary going to Kentucky, it's interesting to see how this team will look. Now, outside of 2019, they've been a consistent 8-9 win team. So I think this year they will drop off slightly, but I think they'll go 7-5 in the regular season. I don't think they're going to immediately fall off and be terrible just because Devin Leary is leaving, even though he is very talented. Pittsburgh surprised me last year, as with Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison leaving, they still finished 9-4 and ranked as they finished the year on a 5-game win streak, mainly behind Israel Abanikanda being insane and having a 20-touchdown season. However, with him gone and Pittsburgh's leading receiver, it's tough to see how this team will do, and I do think they will kind of fall off back to their average, middle-of-the-road ways. I think they're going to finish 5-7, as with a lack of offensive firepower, it's really hard to see this team be competitive. Syracuse was a team with serious conference championship aspirations as they started off 6-0 behind a really solid defense. However, after that loss at Clemson, their defense fell apart and they finished 7-6. Now, there's some talent returning, but I just don't think it's going to go well for Syracuse this year, especially with the middle of their season, as they're playing Clemson, North Carolina, and Florida State back to back with no bye weeks. So with that, and just me not having a lot of confidence in Syracuse after how their season ended, I think them going 5-7 is about right for them. I just can't see them making a bowl game after how last season ended. Virginia is a team that's tough to talk about, as they were 3-7 until tragedy struck their school, making them end their season early. Now with this season, it's going to be hard to see them improve much. In fact, I think they're going to digress, as with Brennan Armstrong leaving, who I thought was their only little bit of talent they had on offense, I see them finishing about 2-10. It's just tough to see this team really do any better, as since Bronco Mendenhall left, it seems like this new coach, Tony Elliott, hasn't been the answer for them. Virginia Tech was a team that also struggled a lot last year, as they went 3-8. Now, their schedule is relatively easy this year, as Florida State's their only ranked team. However, they didn't play a lot of ranked teams last year and they still went 3-8. So this year, I do think they'll slightly improve, going 4-8, as I do think they'll beat Old Dominion this year. I don't expect Old Dominion to beat them 2 years in a row, and I think those games like Marshall and Rutgers are definitely winnable, and I think Virginia Tech can definitely squeak in one ACC victory, but 4-8 is about where I see them going. The last team in this conference is Wake Forest. Now, Wake Forest, similar to Syracuse, fell off in the middle of the season as they were ranked 10th in the country, and they were 6-1, and then they fell apart to finish 8-5. And with Sam Hartman leaving to go to Notre Dame, this team doesn't have a lot of firepower left on offense, which has been the big part of their team the last 2 years. With them playing Florida State, Clemson, and Notre Dame, that doesn't make their schedule any easier too. So for me, I think Wake Forest will finish about 6-6, since the first 4 games are easy and definitely winnable for them. But I think a bowl berth will be just about all they can get. And that wraps up all the individual ACC teams. Now I'm going to talk about who I think will play in the conference championship game, who will win it, and then which team do I think has the best shot to make the playoffs, and which players I think have the best shot to win the Heisman. For the conference championship game, I think it's really just down to two teams. I think for a lot of people, it's just down to two teams. And they are Florida State and Clemson. And with that, I do think Florida State has more talent. And although it is hard to beat Clemson back-to-back, I think they will do it. So with that, I think Florida State will win the conference championship game. And with them being 12-1, I think they will also have the best shot to make the playoffs. And I think they also can make the playoffs, in my opinion. When it comes down to the Heismans, similar to how it's just mainly down to two teams, it's mainly just down to two players in this whole conference, and how ironic that they're both from Florida State and Clemson. From Florida State, I think it's Jordan Travis. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He was a big reason for their improvement last year to 10 games, 10 wins. And then on the other side, there's Clemson. And with Clemson, I think Will Shipley has the best shot to win the Heisman, as he's, again, a super talented running back, and he was a big part of Clemson's offense. He really is the only part of their offense. So those are my Heismans. And with that, we go on to the AAC. Now, the American Conference is interesting to look at, as they lost three big schools for them in Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston. But in return, they're getting 5 new CUSA teams, bringing their total up to 14 teams, making them one of the bigger conferences in the country. With all these new teams and them recently getting rid of divisions, it makes for an interesting conference to look at. So, with that, we'll go into the first AAC team. Starting with Charlotte. Now, Charlotte last year was pretty bad as they went 3-9. The only real bright spot was that they went 2-2 in the last 4 games with an interim head coach. This year they have a new head coach in Biff Poggi, and unless he really is a great hire, it's hard to see this team really improve and make a bowl game, as their only real talent is their quarterback Chris Reynolds, who had 22 touchdowns to 11 picks. And with some tough games like Maryland and Florida, I don't really see this team improving too much. As for me, I think 3-9 again is probably where they'll go. Last year, East Carolina was pretty disappointing to some people, as with a lot of talent returning, some people, including me, thought that they could make a New Year's Six bid possibly as a dark horse. However, that didn't happen, as they went 8-5. This year, all that talent from last year is practically gone, as their quarterback Holton Allers is gone, their running back Keaton Mitchell is gone, and their top 2 receivers, CJ Johnson and Isaiah Winstead, are gone. So with all that offensive talent gone, and with some tough games like UTSA, Tulane, and Michigan, it's really tough to see this team really do any better than 6-6. But to me, I think they're going to go 5-7, as all that talent gone is really going to hurt them. Florida Atlantic was a team last year that was quite literally 1 point away from making a bowl game, as in the final week of the season, they lost to Western Kentucky 32-31. It's pretty funny. However, this year, with Willie Taggart gone, which is an improvement nonetheless, they have a lot of talent that could definitely make them improve a little bit, as with the starting quarterback N'Kosi Perry, who had 31 touchdowns last year returning, their starting running back Larry McCammon back, and with their leading receiver LaJohntay Wester, this team definitely has some room to improve. Now, yes, they do have some tough games, as they're playing Clemson and Illinois out of conference, and they're playing the 2 big guys in the American Conference in Tulane and UTSA. I still think they can improve a good bit, and while I don't think they're going to go perfect outside those games, I think 7-5 is still a pretty good improvement for them, considering that they haven't been really all that good since Lane Kiffin left to Ole Miss. Looking at Memphis, it's really weird when you look at last year, because last year they started the season off 4-1, went on a 4-game losing streak, and then climbed back to go 6-6, winning a bowl game, so they ended 3-1. They do have a lot of that offensive talent returning, which was a big part of why they made a bowl game, as their offense was one of the higher ranked ones in the conference and country. And with the pretty easy schedule, I mean, it looks like they could definitely improve, as really the only tough games are Missouri, Boise, and Tulane. So with that, I think Memphis could go 9-3 and could compete with UTSA or Tulane for that conference championship spot, as the only loss I think they can really lose in the conference would be Tulane, and since they don't play UTSA, that makes it a very interesting tiebreaker if it comes down to that. Navy's a team I don't expect much from this year, with their longtime head coach Ken Niumatalolo leaving, as well as them going 4-8 last year. there's not a lot of upside for them. Now, I'm sure their schedule is relatively easy since they're not playing Tulane and UTSA in their conference. They're still playing Notre Dame, but overall the schedule is pretty easy. But still, I don't see a lot of winnable games on their schedule. And with that and their coach leaving, I think them going around 2-10 to 3-9 is about realistic for them. It really depends on if they beat Army or not. North Texas ended their last season in a CUSA football on a high note as they made the conference championship game. The big part of that was their offense that was ranked in the top 30, led by quarterback Austin On. With him gone and North Texas now in the American, it's interesting to look at this team now, especially with their quarterback. By the looks of it, it looks like Chandler Rogers will be their quarterback to transfer from Louisiana Monroe. And when you look at their schedule, outside of California, the first half of their schedule is actually pretty easy. I wouldn't be surprised if they started off 5-1, but realistically, I think they'll start off about 4-2. They'll probably slip up one of those games. The big challenge for them comes in the second half of the schedule, where they play Tulane, Memphis, UTSA, and SMU consecutively. That's when I probably see them falling apart. So for me, I think North Texas will finish about 6-6 and they'll make a bowl game. Rice has typically been one of the jokes of college football, as they consistently have been one of the worst teams in the game. Last year had a little bit of upside as they were 5-4 at one point, but then they fell off and finished 5-8, but they did technically make a bowl game. This year in the American, there's really no upside for them. They played Texas and Houston out of conference, and then they played Tulane and UTSA. Outside of those games, I mean, there were some pretty easy games in there, but Rice, there's still not a lot of upside for them. So for me, I think they will go about 4-8 to 5-7, but I'd say they go 4-8. SMU has been one of the more consistent teams in the American over the last few years, mainly because of their high-powered passing offense. However, that's brought more to the question this year as Tanner Mordecai left to the transfer portal to go to Wisconsin, and Rashee Rice left for the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see if they can keep that passing offense up. For me, I don't think it'll be as good as it has been, but I still think it'll be solid. And with a tough out-of-conference schedule against Oklahoma, TCU, who are both ranked, it's interesting to see how this team will progress. However, with a pretty easy conference schedule since they get to avoid playing Tulane and SMU, I think them going 7-5 is about right for them. South Florida was one of the worst teams in college football last year as they went 1-11, and it didn't help much when their quarterback Gary Bohannon got injured against Tulane and was out for the rest of the season. Going to this season, he is back, but a big loss for them will be how Brian Battie transferred to Auburn. South Florida, their only tough games are Bama and UTSA, but this is still the same team that went 1-11. As a matter of fact, you could say they were worse as their running back's gone. For me, I think they will improve slightly, but to me, 3-9 is as much as I see them improving. Temple was pretty bad last year as they went 3-9 with a pretty easy schedule as their only ranked game was against Cincinnati. This year, the schedule looks even easier as they're going into the season with no ranked games. While their non-conference schedule is pretty easy, and so is their conference schedule, they still went 3-9 last year with an easy schedule. So for me, I see them just going 3-9 again. I think they'll get 2 non-conference wins as they do play FCS Norfolk State and they play Akron week 1. And maybe they'll squeak in a conference win, but that's about as much as I see them doing. Tulane is the only preseason ranked team in the American Conference this year. And the big question for them is, can they get back to the Cotton Bowl with their 2 big losses being Tajay Spears and Dorian Williams who went to the draft? Tulane does open up with Ole Miss week 2, which is the real test to see if they can climb back or not. And while I want to say they can win that game, it's really tough to say. So for me to play it safe, I think Tulane will go 11-1 with that 1 loss being to Ole Miss. And outside of that game, Tulane's only real test is UTSA at the end to decide most likely who gets home field advantage in the conference title game. Because I still think Tulane has a good bit of talent, as they do still have Michael Pratt, but it's so hard to look at that Ole Miss game because it's neck and neck. Tulsa last year was doing pretty bad until they switched over to their backup quarterback Braylon Braxton. With him, he played pretty well, which included him playing really well in their last 2 games that helped Tulsa finish 5-7. They still didn't make a bowl game, but those last 2 games showed some promise. However, this year, with the leading rusher Deneric Prince and the leading receiver Keelan Stokes gone, it's interesting to look at this team, especially when you look at who they're playing. As out of conference, they're playing both Washington and Oklahoma, and then in the conference, they're playing Tulane, which is 3 ranked teams. It's pretty tough for them, but I do think with Braylon Braxton showing what he could do, I think Tulsa can definitely get back to a bowl game and go 6-6. UAB is another newcomer to the American, as they have been the CUSA ever since they were reformed. Now, with this team, we're looking at a team that has lost their best offensive player in Dwayne McBride. And with that, it doesn't make it very easy for them, as for them, the middle of their schedule is really rough, as they play Georgia out of conference, and then right after Georgia, they do play Tulane, Memphis, and UTSA in that stretch. Doesn't make it too easy for them in the middle. So with that and the loss of Dwayne McBride, I think that UAB is going to miss a bowl game, and I think they're going to finish about 5-7. With the last team in the American, we have UTSA. Now UTSA is another newcomer. As the last 2 years, they've been one of the best teams in the CUSA. As behind Jeff Traylor, they've gone 12-2 and 11-2 in these last 2 years. A big part of that has been their offense led by Frank Harris at quarterback. This year, a lot of that talent from last year is returning, as they have Frank Harris at quarterback, they have Cameron Barnes at running back, and they have Zachary Franklin at receiver. They're 3 leaders of those categories. They do play some tough games, as they have Tennessee and Houston out of conference, and then they have Tulane at the end of the season to most likely decide home field advantage of the conference title game. I do think that UTSA is going to beat Houston. I think they'll get their revenge this time, but I don't think they're going to beat Tennessee, and I don't think they're going to beat Tulane. So for me, I think UTSA will finish 10-2. And finally for the American, who I think is going to be in the conference title game, who I think is going to win it, and although it's not going to happen, who has the best shot to make the playoffs, and who are your best shots to be a Heisman candidate. For the conference title game, I've been saying it the whole time, and I think for most people it's pretty obvious. It's going to be Tulane and UTSA. It doesn't even matter who wins or loses that game. They play in the regular season most likely. That's just going to decide who gets the home field advantage. And I do think Tulane will win that game and get home field advantage. So for me, I think Tulane will get back-to-back wins, making Tulane finish 12-1 and UTSA will finish 10-3. Now, who do I think has the best shot to win the Heisman in the conference? It's not going to happen, but again, Tulane and UTSA is either going to be Michael Pratt or it's going to be Frank Harris. They're 2 amazing, talented quarterbacks. And then who I think has the best shot to make the playoffs? Tulane, as they're the only ranked team in the conference to start the season off, and they do have a tough game against Ole Miss, and then they will play UTSA. So if UTSA is ranked and all that, and if a bunch of craziness happens, then I think Tulane is the best shot. And that wraps up my prediction of the ACC and AAC predictions. Hopefully you liked the video, unless the team that you're a fan of, I said was gonna have a bad record, but hey, you should have been a fan of a bad team. It's gonna happen to me when I'm an LSU fan. They'll probably suck and I'll have to be the one to say it. But that's just how it goes being a college football fan. But hope you enjoyed the video. Like your video and subscribe if you have. And tomorrow on Tuesday, I will be posting Big Ten and CUSA predictions. So hope y'all enjoy that.